Good evening. How are y'all?
Good.
Today I'm going to be talking to you about some topics that have piqued my interest. And first, I would like to start off by talking to you, the audience, and get some of your reaction. So, is there anybody here in their 30s? Yes, ma'am. How old are you?
36.
36. Okay, so do you have a little bit of the same mindset that you did when you were like 15 or 16 when making certain decisions?
No. Totally different.
Okay, well that's what I want to talk to you about today. I'm sure if you're like 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, you don't think the way you did in your 20s or the way that you did, especially in your teens. Am I right?
Right.
Okay, so today I want to talk to you about how the brain of a juvenile and the brain of an adult differ and why juveniles should not be tried as adults. I have a few topics that I would like to talk about using some data that I've collected from website sources. And the first that I'm going to talk about is the mental development. When you are a teenager or a young adult, your brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25. So things and decisions that you make in certain situations are not the same as you would as an adult, like you said. So that is my first point, that when you're younger than 25 and you haven't had that experience that you would as an older adult, 36 or so on, you tend to make more irrational decisions than you would as an adult. So that being said, when you're younger and you're making those mistakes like, oh, should I go with a friend to rob a store or take, candy from somewhere that, I don't have the money to buy, you wouldn't do that if you're an older adult and you've lived and you've learned from that, correct? So the next part to that point is when you make a decision and you end up in a certain area like juvenile court and you aren't an adult yet to be tried in a certain criminal situation setting for that, I believe that you should be able to go to a juvenile court where you can actually get help and be given the knowledge that you need to learn from that and go out and do better. The second part I would like to talk about is how you get more juvenile benefits being in a juvenile prison than you do in in an adult prison. Now you do get adult benefits in an adult prison, but there's a lot more of a variety or spread that you would get in a juvenile prison. You get a better spread of educational learning, whereas if you are a freshman in high school and you get put up in an adult level prison, you are only given a certain amount of criteria that you can learn, and your brain isn't fully developed, as again from point one, to be able to take that criteria because you haven't learned the stuff leading up to that. Also, another thing is you have certain protections because as a juvenile you do not have constitutional rights as you would as an adult. So you do get certain protections, and you also get more of an aspect of access to a counseling, like a one-on-one counseling, as where in adult prisons in certain areas you would not get that. And I believe, because going on to part 3, students or juveniles, or whether they're in school or they've dropped out, they do need that one-on-one counseling, because going from certain situations that are more protected in age levels up to whereas an adult prison is not, it has its own kind of rating, like R rating. They're not shielded from that certain kind of stuff, which has led to, from McLean Harvard Institute of Teaching and Learning that I read about, they have a high risk of juveniles being in adult prisons having sexual abuse. Suicide is a really, really high level of physical, mental abuse, and they're just kind of stuck in this pattern of things that make high risk for them, to where they wouldn't want to try to get help to where they could better themselves to be able to get out. Whereas in juvenile, that's why you're given the counseling, to where you can work on doing one-on-one. That way they can get out and live a better life and actually experience life and not be behind bars for a big amount of time. I have 2 different points that I do think would really benefit from juveniles not being tried as adults, like that would work in as an alternative instead of that. One, I think that, which not every school does it, but some schools do have after-school programs for Boys and Girls Club, if you've heard of that. But I believe that every school for all ages should have that. Especially, I'm starting to see now that there's a higher risk of middle school kids than there is teenagers, like high school senior, juniors, that are getting involved in gangs and robberies, drugs. And I feel like having that some place for them to go as an alternative will make a positive impact on their lives and keep them out of, doing all that gangs, drugs, violence, and all that. And so the second part, I do believe, is if a student were to get involved in the juvenile court at some point, whether it's just for a little bit and then they go on, I feel like they should have that access to go back to that counseling. Like for drug addicts, they have a counselor that they can go back to, just to keep them, give them that extra help that they need to keep them from going back to where they started from. So that was my viewpoint on it. I do not believe that as juveniles you should be tried as an adult. I believe that they're split for a reason, not just for the age, but for all the reasons that I talked about. And I think that if we do continue this, especially for the ones that are younger, that have a more serious crime, I don't think that they should be pushed up to that adult level yet. I think that they should have to go through the process of juvenile first. So thank you.